This, my friends, is the Dreyer Drive Podcast. This is a podcast all about siblings and the people, places, and pop culture that raised us. I can make a promise at the beginning of this episode, actually. I can promise you that not once in the history of podcasts has anybody ever talked about mac and cheese loaf the amount that Jacqueline and I are about to talk about it. And if you're unfamiliar with what mac and cheese loaf is, you're in luck because we are about to explain the delicacy that is mac and cheese loaf. But that's not actually our topic today. In this week, we are taking a deep dive, and by deep, I mean extremely shallow, barely touching the surface dive on the high school that Jacqueline and I both graduated from, Exeter High School in Ajax, Ontario, Canada. And I'd like to make a call right now, a request to anybody who's listening to this podcast who also went to Exeter High School in Ajax, Ontario, Canada. We need you to fact check us. There will be multiple things that we get extremely wrong in this episode because it's our memories and I don't trust them. So please, if you hear something that's off, let us know so that we can pretend that you never said it and imagine that our memories are correct. In all honesty, we will do a future episode where we correct some of the things that we might have gotten wrong. More than that, if you went to Exeter High School in Ajax, Ontario, Canada, we want to hear your stories. How do you remember that school? What teachers do you remember? What crazy things happened that stick out in your memory? Let us know. Oh, and as always, at the end of this episode, we'll finish it off with an unhinged text message from a family member. This week's text message comes from Jacqueline's husband, who talks all about pet names in a text message. And with that being said, here's this week's episode.
I was at the office today, and Justin has an employee who is the sweetest man you've ever met. Like, you know, the kind of sweet that like they don't understand sarcasm or meanness in any way because it's just like not how they were raised.
Yeah.
And I'm a mean person. I'm married to a mean person, and our daughter now works for us at the office, and she's been raised with this level of meanness. So it rolls off her back really easily. She's a nice person, but she doesn't it doesn't bother her at all, as far as I know, until she goes to therapy. But we were in Justin's office, and Addie is he's a home designer, and she's doing her first ever house plan. Like, he's having her do one from start to finish. So it's a big deal. And he had a big meeting with her this morning to kind of go over some of the stuff she needed to do. This coworker came in, and I was just getting ready to leave. And he was like, "Oh, hey guys, our little family's all of the office together." And I'm like, "Oh, hey." And he's like, "What's up?" And I was like, "We're just finally getting Addison to earn her keep. She's been useless up till now." And we all laugh. And he's like, "Oh, he's like, I think we're all just trying to do the same thing." And I was like,
I think we're all just trying to give our best and get by.
So I froze and then said, "Well, that's my time." I was actually getting ready to leave. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know what to say." I froze. And then I gathered up my keys and I was like, "I guess I'm punching out now." And I went to say, "I love you" to Justin, but I stared at this man dead in the eyes as I said it. And I said, "Okay, bye, love you." Looked at him, and Justin was looking at his computer, and he's like, "Hey, bye, love you." And then I just walked out to my car, and I was like, "Oh no." So I froze and fawned without realizing.
I was going to say, I was on the subreddit for podcasting, and I was like, let me see just these amateurs here on this subreddit and just listen to what's bound to be horrible audio quality from every single one. And so they have this thread where it's people just promoting their own podcast. They're like, "Here it is. This is what it's about. Here are the links to all of the different providers where you can download." And I'm like, let me just listen to this garbage. Every single one was so pristinely produced. The audio was so clear. Every part. So I'm like, does everybody just build a sound booth? Do they all go to the studio? Do they all pay sound engineers to make their podcast sound like this? Because then there's us, and we're like,
we're in space. I think
we actually use a ham radio. We are recording this via a ham radio broadcast.
It's the radio that Aaron McDougall and I use to record our podcast, aka radio.
And now the weather.
No, I think the fatal flaw in all of our reasoning and our thought process here is we were like, wouldn't this be a fun hobby? And I think people who do podcasting are like, this is my calling. It is my career. And we're like, this would be funny. Wouldn't it be crazy? And I think we also went into territory of our family. If we do something, we have to do it at an exceptional level at all times. We entered in this thinking it would be fun. And then the competition side kicks in and we're like, oh, you think you're a podcaster? Watch me podcast and I'll be the best podcaster you've ever seen.
Heard. The best you've ever seen. Heard. The thing that I would like to point out in that entire statement is that even the thought that we are doing this at an exceptional level speaks to how delusional we are. This is not an exceptional level. There are literally I went on a podcast and they're like, this is me and my 13-year-old sister and we're separated because we live in different coasts and we're recording a podcast about pop culture. And I listened to it. I'm like, where did you get the recording studio? How did you do this, you 13-year-old genius? This is part of the delusion. Like, here we are, we can only do things to the best level until we look at other people and realize this is so subpar. This is so beyond the standard that people are used to in every way, shape, and form.
But like, don't you think it's kind of charming?
There is no charm. There is no charm. I listen to these other podcasts and I'm like, how? How do you do this between your school part-time job and your other hobbies? You are now recording a podcast that is 90 times better than what we've got going on here.
I use the word charm to make up for anywhere that I lack in my life. So anytime I'm like a bad parent, I'm terrible at my job, I'm like, but isn't it like, it's kind of charming, right? Like you would say you're charmed by it. It's fine. It's
and
fine.
Now really,
that's the theme.
It's fine. This is good enough. Which is another name. I'm sure that podcast exists, but if I was starting another podcast, definitely the Good Enough podcast. It's good enough.
It's the almost exceptional podcast.
We did talk about this in another episode, but I think it got cut out. But it's the almost perfect podcast where it's like frozen items that have been thawed and refrozen 5 times. And the health inspection agency comes into a grocery store and they're like, you guys cannot sell this. This will kill people. And they're like, oh, we'll just give it to Almost Perfect. We'll sell it for half price to Almost Perfect, who will then set up shop in South Ajax and sell this to the community.
At like probably the worst plaza in South Ajax, let's be honest. Like that, remember the deli that was there and it was called like Sal's Meats? And it was like where mom...
That was my mac and cheese plug. That was my mac and cheese plug. And for those of you who are unrefined and have never enjoyed mac and cheese, you think I'm talking about macaroni and cheese, don't you? I'm talking about macaroni noodles and little squares of cheese cold pressed into a block of bologna. You slice that and you've got a little bit of cheese and a little bit of macaroni in every bite.
Unless you've experienced it, it is impossible to explain mac and cheese loaf. First of all, the word loaf,
if you were not referring to actual bread,
it's a meat loaf. And the noodles and the cheese, when I was a kid, mom would buy mac and cheese loaf from probably Sal's. And I would sit there and like poke the cheese and noodles out and eat that.
Didn't we all?
And then only have a slice of what is bologna left.
Grainy bologna. It's not even top quality bologna.
It was not good quality bologna. Like,
let's just call a spade a spade.
Sal's Meats bologna.
I talk about this all the time about wanting to be in the room when decisions are being made. I would have loved to have been in the room when the inventor of mac and cheese loaf walked into his kitchen and saw his 4-year-old child rolling up a piece of bologna and stuffing macaroni and cheese, some Kraft dinner in the middle, and taking a bite. And he's like, Eureka! I've got it! Quick, somebody get me a pen and paper. And he drew it. He drew this square piece of bologna. Rounded corners, though. Like an Apple device. He treated it like an
animals.
We were going to round the corners. It's like that. There are those Canadian Heritage commercials where Alan Naismith is inventing basketball at YMCA in like Boston or wherever he did, somewhere in Massachusetts, I believe. And they're throwing this volleyball, I believe, into a peach basket. And every time someone scores a basket, a literal basket, somebody has to climb up a ladder and pull the ball out. And there's a scene where they show Dr. Naismith standing under the peach basket and he goes, why don't we cut a hole out of the bottom of the peach basket? And the peach farmer is like, but I need these baskets back at the end of the season. But I imagine this guy walking in. I don't know why I imagine it's a guy. I'm sorry. I imagine a parent.
It could be A disgusting woman.
Oh my gosh. I imagine a person walking into a room, their child is wrapping up a piece of bologna and they're spoon feeding macaroni and cheese into the middle. And he's like, I've got it. And he sits down and he draws it. And his partner is drawing the mac and cheese. And the partner draws squared corners. And like Dr. Naismith with the eureka moment of cutting the hole out of the bottom of the peach basket, which by the way wasn't to allow the ball to fall through. It was to allow someone to poke the ball out with a broom handle.
With a broomstick.
You're so close. You were so close. But I imagine looking at this square piece of bologna and the inventor of mac and cheese goes, why don't we shave the corners and make them rounded? And then it's like the Canadian heritage moment. I'm sure it's not invented by Canadian.
They hold the piece of paper up to the sun and the sun turns it into a loaf of mac and cheese.
But that's how I imagine it went down. And I love having this moment of, I wonder what it was like to be there for that important moment in history. And by the way, in the show notes, we will put that Canadian heritage commercial. And for those of you who are uncultured, Canadian heritage commercial, it were these little like public service announcements that would be put on Canadian television, like Canadian commercials, basically, where they would just like brag about the things that Canadians have invented. For the most part, some of them are actually really great, but some of them are like, why don't you cut the bottom out
yeah,
of
but
the
it's
peach
such
basket?
it's such a Canadian need to assert that that's Canadian. Like to assert that basketball is Canadian, and everyone's like, okay, cool. And you're like, a Canadian invented basketball, right? The one about burnt toast, and he like the commercial was like this doctor like literally just like fussing through someone's brain, pushing different parts of it to see if he could like duplicate the signs of a stroke in this woman like smelling burnt toast. And he's like pushing around on parts of the brain and like she's like, oh, I smell burnt toast, and they're like, we've got it. And it's like Canadian heritage, fade out.
Yeah, they just claim it. They're like, that was us. That's what I really wish it said at the end. Like, you're welcome. That was us.
That was us.
But what's really interesting is I just went on to they're called Heritage Minutes. Actually, officially, they're called Heritage Minutes.
You're right.
And I went on to be like, because surely they've stopped doing them. Oh no, there are 100 episodes dating back to 1990.
Yeah,
and
that tracks.
They're still making them. There's one here, I'm looking at it. It's Norman
What else
Kwong,
could there possibly be?
2024. I guess every year there's just a team of people who are like, what did we do this year? Canadians, what do we got? What do we got? What do we got?
Workshop it. Throw it out. No wrong answers.
Well, I got a Canadian here that was arrested in Thailand for... No, we can't do that one. Can't do that one. Do you remember the Superman one? There was a Superman, a Canadian-made Superman.
We will post some of these, but I also will post a picture of mac and cheese loaf because I don't think people are picturing it. Like whatever you're picturing in your head is a mac and cheese loaf. Like you are wrong. You need to see it. You need to feel it.
We're starting a new segment this week, which is called the Crispies Challenge. And this week's Crispies Challenge is I want you to go to your neighborhood deli, preferably an authentic deli. I'm not talking about the deli corner of your, and I want you to go, hi, can I get a pound of your finest mac and cheese loaf? And I want you to record the response that you get. There's your challenge.
My first job ever was at the Loblaws Deli. Obviously, we had to learn how to operate a meat slicer. I was so bad at it that I would leave every day, like the fingertips of my gloves would be shaved off. And I'm like, how many pieces of gloves did I hand over to people in their meat? I should not have been working there.
Those were the 2 years, I believe, that Loblaws got the most complaints about receiving mac and cheese loaf, missing the mac and the cheese. You're just there poking it. Why are we talking this much about mac and cheese? We are 28 minutes in. We have done nothing but talk about mac and cheese loaf and Canadian Heritage Minutes.
Those are the topics today.
This is what you get. This is the quality that you subscribe
I just think
for.
it just imagine our mother to 5 children sitting at home waiting to be fed. And like, she's like, what am I going to feed these 5 children? 4 of which are like teenage boys. Like, I guess I'm going to have to like, what can I get the most out of? What has protein and carbohydrates and fat all in one? And it was like, it's got to be the mac and cheese loaf.
What is going to please all 5 of these children and also affect their health long term? Mac and cheese. Let's go with the mac and cheese, because there's no way that is real cheese. That is powder, some kind of mythical, magical powder, and some
orange.
gelatin. It was bright orange.
bright orange, because it looked like, honestly, like someone had pressed Lucky Charms into bologna.
Really.
Like the
cheese were the marshmallows. The cheese were the marshmallows, and the macaroni was the healthy part of Lucky Charms.
Obviously.
The healthy bits. I don't know what to call them, but the healthy ones.
The whole grains.
Yeah, the whole grains. I'm sure is exactly what we're being paid to say by the cereal industry. It's now time to introduce this week's sponsor. General Post. General Mills.
Yeah,
General Mills.
Yes,
General Mills
and Post.
Or Post.
Yes, yeah. I'm
both.
literally looking at a box of Fruity Pebbles because we weren't really allowed to have like sugary cereals when we were kids. Despite mom giving us mac and cheese loaf, she was health conscious when it came to cereal.
Again, we know where she drew the line.
You don't have any tattoos, correct? Like,
no, I don't have any tattoos.
Okay.
No.
I wanted to see what, if you were going to get a tattoo, what would it be? Two of our Daniel and Dallin are both pretty heavily tattooed, I would say, correct?
Yeah.
Both are tattooed. Daniel, I think, is like full upper torso, but the funniest thing was he started his first tattoo he ever got. He was probably at what, like 36, 35, 36? Like he was older.
Yeah.
He was definitely not like a kid. When he got it done, he like had us all jump on a FaceTime. Do you remember this? He was like, I got a tattoo. I want you guys to see it. We all jumped on a FaceTime or a Messenger or whatever so he could show. And I think it was because he wanted us to prepare mom. Like he was like,
that's what it was.
You guys are going to need to tell mom that you like my tattoo. First of all, he's 35 years old, a grown adult. He's still like, mom's going to be so mad if I get a tattoo. So
I need you guys to tell mom. I need you to tell her.
Soften this blow. And also he wanted us to be like, we saw Daniel's tattoo and we really like it. And he showed us, and it was a full chest piece that says family is forever, right?
Yeah.
Family is forever. And we were dying. And he said, I remember, he was like, mom can't be mad because it's a pretty Mormon saying.
And it is. It really is. It
is a pretty Mormon saying.
Like, I feel like every 60 to 80-year-old Mormon woman has that crocheted in one of those like framed crochet things,
100%.
crocheted pieces. What do you call them?
Crocheting.
On the wall that says like family is forever.
So he wanted us to all go to mom and be like, mom, like if he was going to get a tattoo, like it's a pretty like Mormon tattoo to get. Mormons famously do not have tattoos. So, and then since then he has probably 100 tattoos. So,
roughly.
But I feel like it really set the foundation. But if like, have you ever considered getting a tattoo?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is one thing holding me back from not getting a tattoo. In Japan, where I live, in the Far East, the land of the rising sun.
I was just going to say the land of the rising sun. Gosh.
Where I currently reside, it is still something that prevents you from doing certain things in Japan, meaning if you have a tattoo. So for example, I bring Noah to her swimming lessons, or she has swimming lessons every Friday as part of her school. I go and watch. There's a sign posted outside that says, if you have tattoos, you cannot enter the pool. Pools, gyms, sometimes beaches, and hot springs are places where typically you're not allowed to enter if you have tattoos. If you have a small one, they'll give you some kind of like seal, like some kind of like, to cover it up. But if you have a large one, you can't cover it up. You're just not allowed access to those places. I love Japanese hot springs. Like absolutely love them. You go to them, and I think I've explained in other episodes about what they are, but you pay your $8 and you go and you sit in volcanic water, for lack of a better term, and just hang out, right? I love it. Absolutely love it. Knowing that if I got a tattoo, I wouldn't be able to do that just kills me. So I don't do it. That's why I don't have any tattoos. I think about it all the time. My Instagram, I probably follow, no exaggeration, 150 tattoo artists because I'm very interested in it. I like Japanese hot springs and I can't do it. If I was going to get a tattoo, 19-year-old Ryan, I'm very glad 19-year-old Ryan didn't have the money to get a tattoo, because I would be walking around with like an and one basketball tattoo. Or like a basketball going through a flaming mesh. Do you know what I mean? Like that's what I would have had. And I am so glad that I was too poor to afford a tattoo at that age. If I was to get a tattoo right now, I would go big and I would get like the full chest and both arms done. And I would get kind of like a traditional Japanese hand poked tattoo, probably of some of the different mythical characters that exist in Japanese folklore. But I will say this. I remember hearing somebody talking about how to decide whether or not you should get a large tattoo. I think it's cool when people just pull the trigger on smaller tattoos that just like mean something to them in the moment. Like Ed Sheeran, you look at his tattoos, they're incredible. It's like a children's drawing of Mario and then like a random Pokemon and like it's just whatever I think that's kind of cool because they kind of tell the story. But I remember hearing this person talking about like, if you're going to go get a tattoo, go to an art gallery and look at the art that is timeless. Look at the art that's still being displayed 200 years later, 400 years later, that people are looking at and saying, this is incredible, and use that as your baseline of like the style or the things that you could be and should be tattooing on your body are things that are timeless. And I kind of like that idea, like looking at art from hundreds of years ago and being like, it's kind of cool to like carry that. And that's my personal thing. I know a lot of people will disagree with that, but I like the idea of like looking at tradition and looking at stories and being someone that really enjoys storytelling, looking at those stories of old and being like, yeah, you know what? Let's put that on my body.
I have a tendency of seeing something and being like, this is my whole personality now. And it lasts for 6 months and then I never look at that thing again. And so I know that if I would get a tattoo, it would be something that I cared deeply about in that moment, like Animal Crossing. And then like 6 months later, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have my favorite Animal Crossing villager on my body for the rest of my life now. Like, what was I thinking?
How do I get rid of this mac and cheese loaf tattoo?
With the color.
I made a big mistake.
So that's what I'm mostly afraid of. Also, after Addie and I went to Africa, we wanted to like do something to like be like, this was a big year for us. Like she graduated, we went on this big trip together, whatever. So we decided to go get extra piercings. And even just doing that, as soon as it was done, I was like, I don't want this anymore. Like I regret everything. I hate these stupid piercings. They've been nothing but pain since the moment we got them. And every night I go to bed laying my head down being like, why did you think that you could do this, Jacqueline?
And for the record, can we please explicitly state that we are talking about ear piercings?
Yeah, they're just ear piercings.
Like, the fact that you didn't say ear made it sound like it could be something else.
Well, I would assume that if people, like I went with my 18-year-old daughter, I would hope that people would just assume that it was an ear. Like I'm a cool mom.
We are from Ajax. We are from Ajax, okay? And I say that proudly.
If I got a tattoo, it would have to be something that could never be changed about me or taken away from me because I will drop something so quickly. As soon as I'm interested in something, like the wave has crested and I'm done with that thing forever and I will never pick it up or look at it again.
Which is exactly how you ended up with your HMS Ajax battleship tattoo on your back.
You know,
Ajax,
I'll always be from Ajax.
We'll do an episode on Ajax and we'll dive into some of the pieces.
Actually, today's episode is going to be quite a bit about, so today is a places episode.
Hey.
So it's funny. You should say that. Actually, we could probably just like dive into it now since we're talking about where we're from and being proud of it. I was thinking today about doing a places episode and I was like, I bet there's lots of really interesting information about Exeter High School, the high school that we went to. Ryan, when I tell you that Exeter has been scrubbed from the hallways of history, there is nothing about Exeter truly doesn't exist except in our minds. And I was like, you know what? Niche or no, like we're diving into only people from Exeter will understand. But I was like, this is great for SEO. We will be the top result anytime someone searches Exeter High School. We're the only people doing the hard work, asking the hard questions, and talking about Exeter High School.
Digging deep, bearing this torch, making sure that this flame does not die. Or we lived in a Shutter Island scenario where we were actually just in some type of hospital for 4 years and nobody told us, and we're like, no, this is our school, this is a school, we have a falcon mascot. Sum 41 went here, Sum 41 went to Exeter.
When you Google Exeter High School, the only two things that come up are Sum 41
and please say unsolved murder, please say unsolved murder, please say unsolved murder.
Close. No, but these videos that someone that I think I remember uploaded of walking through the high school hallways, again, about the time that I would have graduated. The thing about Exeter was that it started as a trade school, I believe in the 80s, was converted into a high school for a very relative short period of time. And I was the last graduating class and it shut down the year I graduated. And we were all, at that time, there was a grade 13 that you could go to called
OAC.
It was called OAC. And so for our grade 13 year, if you opted to go through to grade 13, we were then sent to Ajax High. We shared a field with Ajax High, but Ajax High was like a real school and Exeter was kind of, for being named after a ship, which it was, ran a real loose ship for what it was named after like, and also Exeter's like I believe it's like a British boarding school. It's like, it had a really like upper crust name, and Exeter could not have been a lower crust place to go to school. It was so strange. So as it was like a trade school, most of the school was dedicated to the trades. So we would go to classrooms in a shop class, or there was a cooking class. Like there was still a really big emphasis, I think, at Exeter of learning a trade while you were there. Unlike, Ajax was just a normal high school.
We were one of 2 schools in Canada at the time that had an aviation class of some sort. You remember in one of the shops, there was an actual like jet turbine from
one of my high school friends is an aviation mechanic who graduated from Exeter. It was a very small school, again, relatively speaking to what like a high school would be. I had a really small graduating class. Most of the school was dedicated to shops and the culinary school and that kind of stuff. So the classrooms were kind of like a bolt-on afterthought to the actual school. So when you like entered the school, it had its banner. It said how many like accident-free. No, I'm just kidding.
3 hours since our last accident. The ambulance is there dragging a body out.
But you were like entering into like a cinder block workshop when you were entering in the schools, especially if you were entering in through like the student parking lot. It went directly right into the shop classes. So to get to your regular classes, you were like hearing like the buzzsaws in the background. Like it was a really interesting place.
It's like the scene in 8 Mile where Eminem is going in to ask Manny for some extra shifts. That's going into Exeter every day. There's like a press, pressing down, folding steel, somebody welding, somebody melting down some rings and necklaces that they've just snatched off of another human.
Might have actually been child labor. We ran a
Without
daycare.
A doubt.
I worked in a daycare for a semester, and that was like a class that you took was like running a daycare.
One of the culinary instructors would pull up and they have a catering business, and then you realize if you're in the cooking, you're literally just making the food that they're going off and serving at lunch and being paid for.
Yeah, chicken burgers every day.
Oh, if you had the money.
Yes, well, they had like a regular cafeteria, and as far as I know, Canada doesn't have like lunch programs like we do in the States, where like kids can qualify for a free lunch, or you just like load up it's like $2 a day, and you just like load up their lunch card or whatever, and they go in and swipe it, or they key in their number and they get whatever lunch. And lunch is, I believe, legally required. The school legally has to offer some type of lunch, and that was not the case there. There was like a cafeteria where you could buy giant cookies from, which I actually ate for my lunch every day for 2 straight years, not anything else. Or we had like a sports bar.
Yeah, it was actually called a sports bar.
And it was called the Falcon's Nest. And like one of my most enduring memories is you'd go in there and the kids who were taking culinary were working the sports bar, and there was like this really convoluted ordering system where you had to write down your order on a piece of paper and then hand it up, but there would be like 50 other kids. So like you just hand your paper up hoping that like it would surf its way to the front of the sports bar and someone would grab it and then call out your order. That's probably one of my greatest sources of anxiety to this day, going to a restaurant. Like, I don't know how to order here.
You write it down, you're throwing it behind and then threatening because that's what you had to order there. And what would happen is you would watch your order get bumped down. The cooler kids, or the strong kids entered the sports bar. They would just kind of walk in and Moses like part the Red Sea, write their order down and slide it across. And if you didn't treat it with the ultimate priority, you would be threatened, which then would result in that being treated with the ultimate priority. They'd be like, all right, I'm dropping everything because this person has just threatened my life.
Well, that's when it really came in handy to be the younger sibling of 2 people who were already at the school and who were really visible people in different ways. Like Daniel was visible in one way, which meant, I've said before, I honestly thought Daniel was a mop boss of his own gang at the time. And people were genuinely terrified of him. And then you were kind of just like loud and out there. So being a sibling of that, like I could go into the sports bar and as a younger, like a grade 9, a grade 10, and you'd hear like the calls of like little Porter and they would help me. I did have a great access to big brothers at that school because everybody had been there, and we were there at the same time for at least 1 year. I remember Daniel and I had the same science class 1 year.
Because you were so advanced or because Dan was catching up?
I remember them looking through the list and calling out our names. Daniel wasn't there. Daniel didn't actually go to school ever. And I remember them calling Daniel Porter, Jacqueline Porter, and the teacher was like, "Oh, are you twins?" And I was like, "Ooh, sadly no."
4 years.
There's a 4-year age gap.
One quick story about Dan, or at least his impact in that school for us, at least. Like, we're talking about a very small high school in a very small place in a very big country and in a very global world.
Canadian heritage.
Canadian heritage. This one should be. I want someone to produce this. I will pay. The story I'm about to tell, I want this to be produced as a Canadian heritage moment. I'm in grade 9 and there's grade 9 initiation, right? So grade 11 or grade 12 students do something to the grade 9s to like play a prank on them or whatever. And so it's grade 9. I'm in gym class. I finish up gym class. I'm in the change room. I just finished getting changed along 30 other grade 9 students, and a teenager by the name of Joey walks in to the change room and he's like, all right. We got to do this. He's like, all you grade 9s get in the showers. We'd all just changed into our regular clothes. We're out of gym clothes. He's like, all of you in the shower. And you hear them, come on, Joey, no, please don't make us do this. And they all start filing into the showers. And Joey's like, not you, little Porter. You stay with me. And I'm like, yeah. So I go and stay beside him. They all walk in the showers and he's like, turn them on. And they're like, come on, Joey. No, man, don't make us do this, please. We got classes. He's like, turn them on. And you see all the kids like reach out and slowly like press the shower button and just stand there getting drenched in their regular clothes. And it was me and a buddy of mine named Z who were allowed to not be in the shower because we had older brothers who were the same age as Joey. And he's like, not you two. You guys are with me. That's the Canadian heritage moment I want. I want to be like,
you're all just standing there with your arms crossed. It fades out.
It's just drenched, crying, holding their duotangs.
Not the duotangs.
Heritage. All these Canadian things, eating pineapple pizza and a mac and cheese sandwich.
Every so often, I obviously, like, I live in a place where the culture gap isn't huge, but every so often I'll use a word that my family, and because up until now I haven't had to use that word because like there's no reason for me to use a duotang, but my kids are in high school and I'm like, oh, should we grab you some duotangs? And they're like, what words are coming out of your mouth right now, Mom?
Is that a drink? I'm sorry. What is that? Is that a personality disorder? Is that a movie title?
And then I'm like, it just is a handy word. Like, how else do you describe a duotang other than
it's a duotang? Like, it's a duotang.
It's like, I'm like, what am I supposed to go to Target and ask for a 2-sided folder like a peasant? What the heck is wrong with you?
Which is also so non-specific. A 2-sided folder. I'm sorry. What are you talking about? That would be my
kind that had the prongs in the middle, right?
Yeah, you fold them up. You poke them through, like they slide through and then and then that's the tang. You fold them down into a tang to hold your paper there. If I was working at a retail store and somebody came up and said, hi, where do you keep the 2-sided folders? Do you mean every folder that's ever been created? I need you to be a little bit more specific. If somebody came up to me and said, excuse me, sir, where do you keep the duotangs? I'm like,
I would know.
You're in luck. We just got a fresh shipment in yesterday.
Crispy duotangs ready for the start of the year. There was like a reputation among the other high schools in the area. We had friends that went to Ajax High, and it was purely like what region you were in. It was purely just like where you were located. But because of the area of Ajax we lived in, Exeter was an extremely like blue collar school. We lived on the older side of Ajax High, and the newer side got to go to Ajax, or our friends who were even fancier went to the Catholic high school, Dennis O'Connor, Doc.
I had friends who went to another school. They went to a school in the next town over in Whitby, and they would talk about the experience of arriving to Exeter High School for an away game. So one thing that we have failed to mention up until this point is that there was barbed wire fence.
French, my favorite.
Another Canadian invention. Those fenches.
That would be a really good name for our followers as well.
Fenchies. Just call them Fenchies. Crispy Fenchies. All right, all you crispy Fenchies. Okay, let me try this again. They would show up, and the part that we have failed to mention is that there were barbed wire fences on the parking lot side of Exeter High School. And the fences were to prevent people from like breaking into the shops at night because there was so much expensive equipment. But they said they would pull up on the bus, and we also had there were bars on the windows on that side for the same reason. But for the uninitiated, it clearly looks like a prison. Like you pull up and there's barbed wire fences, there's bars on all the windows, and there's people that look like they're in like a work camp outside with just like tools and welding masks and like
coveralls
drilling stuff into wood. And they said it was the most intimidating thing ever. They're like, where? We have driven 8 minutes and somehow we are on Shutter Island. What is going on here? And they would be so intimidated because they didn't know what was going to happen when they got off the bus. And it wasn't so much what would happen when they got off off the bus. It was when they would try to get back on the bus after playing one of our teams, and they are surrounded by 20 to 30 of Dan's friends threatening physical violence if they don't get on the bus and go back to where they came from. They are literally from 8 minutes away. They were friends outside of school.
We literally shared a field with another high school. When I graduated, I decided I was going to do my OAC year briefly. And
for 3 days. For a total of 3 days.
And I'll tell you exactly why it was so short-lived. I had to go to OAC at Ajax High, which also was 3 times the size of Exeter. I never got my bearings once at Ajax High. I was there all the time because you'd go there for dances. You'd go. I still to this day, drop me in Ajax High, I will die there because I don't know my way out of it.
I'm sorry. Did you drop out of OAC because you couldn't navigate the hallways? You just didn't know where your classroom is? You're like, well, I guess I'm done here.
I found the closest exit and I never went back. No, I took a calculus
Perseverance and grit, resilience are the words that come to mind.
That's what they taught us at Exeter High. I went to my first day of calculus and I remember sitting in the classroom it was probably like a 80-20 split between Ajax High kids. And because not a lot of Exeter kids, I felt like even decided to go on. Like once they were done or didn't finish, they just left.
Well, they couldn't find Ajax High School. It's just like, across the, they're like, where is this? Where's my new school? And they're like, well, I guess I'm done. I guess I've graduated. LinkedIn profile update.
Am I a welder? So
hold on. Just for those of you who don't understand grade 13 or its purpose, it was an extra year to basically prepare you for university.
Yeah, so that's what I thought my path was going to be until I went to Ajax High. And so there was probably an 80-20 split between Exeter kids and Ajax kids on the first day. We're in calculus. The professor, which okay, Ajax, you got professors? Cool. Like we had a guy that we hired from the car plant.
No, he was there just in between shifts.
Teaching a quick class on aviation mechanics. So we're over there and the professor goes, okay, everybody go ahead and take out your unit circles, make sure they're labeled, and we'll get started. And all the Ajax kids took out a piece of paper that ostensibly was a unit circle. And every kid at Exeter looked around and we were all like, what's a unit circle? We had never seen a unit circle. We didn't know what it was or how to label one. We didn't have, and I knew at that moment, like, oh, this is not for me. We're just going through a pencil case of like a protractor and they're like, not a unit circle. Like,
a compass?
Pencil sharpener. Like, still not a unit circle, guys. That, I feel like that was the biggest difference to me. Like, oh, like Ajax High has been like running a real high school operation here. And we've been doing playtime over at Exeter High for the last 4 years, running a daycare and a sports bar.
And I picture the scene. I picture the first day of school. There's all of the kids who actually could navigate to Ajax High School. And the outside is like the scene from any zombie movie after a group of people have fortified themselves in shelter, where the zombies are just stumbling around. They don't know where they are because they are zombies. And I just imagine looking out to the shared soccer field to the hundreds of kids who couldn't figure out where Ajax High School is. And they're just walking around the field.
One of the things that I've tried to explain to like my family after the fact was like one of the wildest things that happened at Exeter High, which would have been, I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember the Valentine's Day match?
Nope.
So while I was there, the student council would run a program where you took a personality test. And on Valentine's Day, on a giant board in the foyer of the high school, they would post you and your match so everybody could see it. And so you'd go in that day and like run your finger down the list to find your name and find out who you had been matched with. They did not take into consideration age or interest. It was like sheer personality. And like sometimes you'd be matched with someone who you were truly terrified of or you found disgusting. And everybody would then know that you had been matched with this person. And like now, and I'm like, that was really messed up that a school was like, sure, I 100% sanction this. Let's not take into consideration sexual orientation or anything else. Everybody is a boy and a girl, and you're going to get married, and you're going to be a hardworking blue-collar family.
Yeah.
At the end of it.
Yeah, you are going to be an aviation mechanic. The other wild thing is, I don't know if they still do this. I think we may have touched on this in the graduation episode where we talked about Addie's graduation, but the awards, we did talk about this, but the awards that they give out, right? Like, it's not like you're the MVP of the team. Those were a thing, but you also got awards like Dan. Dan got an award as the most likely to appear on Jerry Springer. That was his award And he has no say in it. He has no idea that's happening. But at like prom, they're like,
at prom.
At prom, they're like, let's give out some of the awards. And you're like, all right, most likely to appear on Jerry Springer. How can you even give that out? How is there not an adult in the room, a grown up in the room who was like, guys, I actually think this is a really bad idea. And the same thing goes for the matching. Like, how was there not a responsible grown up who was like, let me tell you all of the reasons why this is a horrible idea.
Did we say what we were voted, both of us, on?
We did say, I don't know if it made it into the final. I can't remember if it was actually part of the episode, but go ahead, tell the world.
I was voted most likely to brighten your day, which makes me laugh now because I don't think I'm a particularly sunny person. But I was really proud of that. And then I was like, thank you for, it was on a plaque. Like, thank you for my plaque. Now let's go dance to What's Your Fantasy by Ludacris. at a dance with children.
This is in a previous episode. I was voted most likely to be the next prime minister.
Oh yeah, One thing I always tell my kids now is my son started high school. Here, high school is only 3 years. You start in 10th grade. And he was starting his first day at high school. And it's obviously a much bigger school. And he was like, oh, like, what do I, like, he was kind of going through, I like literally printed out a map for him. Sorry for putting it on blast like this, Andrew. I printed out a map for him because that's the kind of person I am. Like, I'm an over planner. I would like mark everywhere I was going first.
You would quit school because you cannot locate your classroom.
It's too much. I need to, and I would not ask for help. That's for sure. I need to know deep inside, like I just need to be like directed by the wind in my internal compass. So I was marking it down and he was like, what do I do if I like walk into the wrong class? It's going to be so embarrassing. I'm like, Andrew, literally every person in there is only thinking about themselves because you are teenagers. I'm like, no one would even notice if you walked into the wrong classroom. And I'm like, why didn't I know that as a teenager? Why do you only get this knowledge as an adult? And be like, nobody really cared. And everybody also, I think, unless you were like extremely bullied in high school, most people would like look back on high school and it's like, yeah, it was like good vibes, whatever, hung out with my friends 24/7, learned to weld. And I wish I knew that now.
Sorry, when does that hit you as an adult? So I can mark that on my calendar?
Like, am I going to go into the wrong classroom?
Do you remember any of the senior pranks that were done at Exeter High School?
I like vaguely remember a flood, and I don't know how close that was to me, but I do remember kids flooding the foyer, the entryway that we had. And I'm like, that should have shorted out some electricity, but we had electricians that went to school with us, so it was fine.
Problem solved. Yeah, I believe that was for goldfish. I believe that they were trying
yeah.
I believe they were trying to put goldfish, like they just assumed that this was a watertight facility and they could just put a few gallons of water in there, a few 100 gallons. I have no idea how much water. Then just throw some goldfish and it would just become an aquarium. Like, that's peak teenage reasoning, right? Like, okay, what should we do?
Water
well, this must
fish.
It works in my aquarium. Like, not even thinking through, we have to open the doors to this foyer to get in, to place the water, and then exit through the same doors, which doesn't take a lot of unit circles to figure out.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Probably my favorite Exeter High School prank is the senior year just before me. So I would have been in grade, which we would call grade 11. So my second last year of high school. I arrived and everybody was standing outside. And I was like, why is everyone standing outside? And then I found out that the rugby and like hockey team, the teams got together the night before and moved all of the giant landscaping rocks in front of the entrances and exits of the high school. So nobody could get into school. It was just all of these teachers in panic trying to figure out like what to do to try to get in. How are we going to...
These 21-year-olds.
These 21-year-olds, right? These grown men, older than the teachers, moving these landscaping rocks in front of the entrances to Exeter High School.
One time, I remember being in English class, and I had an English teacher. No names. I harbored.
Hold on. You were in an English class with an
I did
English
take English.
teacher.
I didn't take English. He was not my favorite English teacher. But again, there was 3 of us in high school at the same time, and then as soon as Daniel cycled out, and you cycled out, Jonathan and Dallin. So there was always at least 2, if not 3, porters in the high school at the same time. And I was in English, and it was, for some reason, we were having it in the music room that stepped down. So it was like the orchestra room. And I did play French horn, not to brag, with a boy named Patrick who would empty his spit valve onto my shoes every day. Anyway.
At some point, that becomes your fault. Look, at some point, that's on you.
Honestly,
Day 1, 2, and 3, maybe it was unexpected, but after that is on you.
No bad feelings towards Patrick. But we were in the orchestra room for English. The acoustics were really good in there, obviously, for, I guess, whatever they were using for orchestra.
Obviously, we were talking about Exeter High School.
It was a top-notch musical observatory. And he was going through the class list the first day of English, Porter, Jacqueline. And I said, here. And he was like, oh, are you like one of the porters that I taught before? And I was like, probably. I have 2 brothers. And then I told him, and I'll have 2 more coming through. And he was like, 5 kids. And I remember just the echo in front of everybody. He was probably pretty young too. He was like, 5 kids. He was like, your parents must have been busy. And it like echoed off the wall. I was like, is it? And I wanted to jump into a welder at that moment. And I was so embarrassed.
Excuse me, can you just roll me into this lathe?
So like when you're in high school, you want to be as normal as possible. And being one of 5 kids all attending high school at the same time was weird. And also being really visible kids at the school was weird. And I was like, I just wanted to be like, again,
I want to play my French horn in peace. Wait, this is English class. Patrick, why are you spitting on my shoe? You only do that in music.
Patrick, why are you here? Why is this French horn in my hands? Why am I playing French horn?
Shutter Island. This is Shutter Island. We are describing You thought you were in English class. You were actually in music class. And this person was actually just blowing musical notes into a tenor saxophone or a bassoon. It's still unknown.
Didn't you play the oboe?
No, I played the bassoon. Get your facts straight.
Okay, sorry.
And I was in grade 7. Grade 7 or 8, I can't remember. Grade 7 or 8. The teacher handmade my double reeds for me.
I don't know if I like that. Canadian heritage.
Canadian heritage moment. She's there binding these 2 reeds and handing it to a 12-year-old student.
I played French horn because they didn't have anybody to do it. And because I was such an extreme people pleaser, they knew if someone asks me to do something, I'll do it. To this day, I will never question it. I will just do the thing that you've asked me to do. The music teacher was like, we don't have anybody to play French horn. Jacqueline, will you play it? And I'm like, of course. It's been my greatest dream in life to play the French horn.
And will you also sit beside Patrick? Yes, I will.
Patrick was gross.
You look over, there's just a pool surrounding your chair.
No Tino shade to this day on Patrick, wherever you are, you're disgusting.
I imagine him listening to this podcast, French horn in hand.
A singular tear rolling down his face. I thought we were friends.
I think you've probably already covered it about like a singular story or regular occurrence at Exeter that just kind of stands out to you like, yeah, that pretty much sums up Exeter High School in a singular story. So there's been a few things mentioned. I just didn't know if there's anything else top of mind for you that stands out that like stamps like the heritage moment for Exeter High School.
Do you have one?
I do.
That's really funny to be like, I don't know. Let's all go around the room and say something about ourselves. Do you have one? I'll go first.
Let's go around and say our favorite Japanese words. This is really stacked in someone's favor.
Let's all say the coolest place we've lived. You go first.
Everybody have their unit circles. I'm not equipped for this at all.
No, I'm afraid. I fear that the unit circle was the bow on top of my Exeter High School experience.
It's like, this is what you get. Kids, zombies outside. Can't find Ajax High School.
I like snuck in. I'm like wearing a skin suit of an Ajax High School student because I'm like, please don't realize I'm from Exeter.
Okay, so this one day, it's our first period of the day, and we get into school. The classroom that we're sitting in is the first classroom to the right of the main entrance. So you go into school, you turn right, there's an elevator on your right hand side, and then the classrooms begin. I think maybe you went through a set of doors too, but anyways, it's the first classroom there, and we all go in. And there's a kid who is in that class, and his nickname, I can say his nickname, it's also very much related to this episode. His nickname was Loaf. And Loaf,
perfect.
Yeah. Loaf was late for class, and he comes running into English class just after the announcements had finished or whatever. He comes running in, and within seconds of him being there, the entire classroom smelled horrible. It was as if somebody had been sprayed directly by a skunk. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, like, what is that smell? Loaf says, oh yeah, I was just sprayed by a skunk. And we're like, why would you come to class? He's like, I didn't know what else to do. We're like, hold on. There were no other options for you. You did not know what else to do. The only option was to come to class after being sprayed directly by a skunk. And he was like, yeah, it came out of the bushes just as I was walking into school. I stood there for a second. I didn't know what to do. I waited for the announcements to finish. We're like, leave. You are already, just leave. Leave the classroom. This has already gone on too far.
The picture that we've painted of the exterior of Exeter, like barbed wire, skunks coming at you from every angle,
stones blocking you from entering the school. Teachers who are the same age as students.
It's the step-on club of schools. Like, this school has everything. A jet engine, skunks, a kid named Loaf, mac and cheese loaf.
A sports bar.
A sports bar.
Did Homer invent this school? I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, rest in peace, Exeter High. Again, I do think it might be kind of a conspiracy that they were so ashamed that Exeter High existed and ran for as long as it did that it has been like forcibly removed from the internet. And nay, I say no more.
We existed. We were there. I assure you, there are others. There are others just like us.
We remember.
We remember, lest we forget.
Canadian heritage. It's just Exeter High, surrounded in barbed wire.
Kids just aimlessly hammering nails into blocks of wood for no reason.
In the distance, a wolf house.
And kids still searching for Ajax High School. To this day, I'm sure there's three. There's three of them that are out there.
12 feet away. Like, I'm not exaggerating. Okay, well, that's all I have for Exeter High. It was, I feel like it falls into the places category for us.
This is a good one. I did not come into this one expecting to be talking about Exeter High School. I did not expect to be saying the words Exeter Falcons and or Loaf at all today, outside of my passion for mac and cheese loaf.
The, production value might not be there, but like the content, tip top.
I want to watch the drop off in this episode because I can see there's like a graph that I get of like where people drop off at what minute. I'm going to see a massive drop off at mac and cheese loaf.
No,
90%, 90%. And then the remaining 10% is going to get 10% will get deep into the Exeter High discussion. They'll mostly drop off, but there'll be three people. The ones who are still searching for Ajax High School are going to go all the way to the end. They're going to make it all the way to the end.
This is it. I'm finally going to get there. And guess what? We're not going to tell you where it is.
And after this episode wraps up, they're going to go, so it wasn't just a dream.
Stop. Ching. That was the glimmer in my eye.
It's that like I see dead people moment.
Honestly, where's the script? Write it now. Release the Exeter cut.
Release the Exeter cut. This one, I feel, this is going to be an interesting one to watch the drop off. But I think regardless of where you were, if you were a kid, if you were a teenager during those years, you have the same stories about your high school. Like I remember going to my friends who lived in Whitby, the next town over, and listening to them tell these same stories about their teachers and their friends and their shop class and like their hallway legends or whatever. Like I think it doesn't matter where you go. You know, a lot of people have that experience of that place feeling like the world, for better or for worse, for 3 or 4 years. That's me always trying to find a way to bring it back to other people so they get to the end of this and they're not like, I'm sorry, what did we just listen to? Duotangs, peach baskets, mac and cheese loaf, Exeter High School, and a man named Loaf. He was a boy. He was a teenager.
He was our teacher.
He was sprayed by a skunk and still made it in.
Mr. Loaf.
Mr.
Loved
Loafy.
It. My unhinged text of the week actually doesn't come from our immediate family. It comes from my husband, but it's about this podcast. So I feel like it really does.
We'll allow it.
Tie in. We'll allow
Judges?
one time.
Judges? We'll allow it.
Justin, enjoy your moment of the sun because it's not going to last that long. The other day when we released the podcast for the day or whatever, I've actually been posting the link to it with an old picture of us that I find because I just think they're really funny. People love to see it. Truly, I looked like a character from Nightmare Before Christmas until I was 17. So like a little shrunken apple head is what I usually describe myself as a child.
By an artist who skipped the day where they learned how to draw eyes. He's like, sure, one can point this direction and this other one. It doesn't even matter where it points. No one's going to be focused on the eyes.
We'll just cover it with glasses. No one will see. No one's going to know.
Magnifies.
So I've been posting the picture and just adding the link on my Instagram or whatever. This past week, I posted it and then did the thing where you say like, honey, wake up, a new blah, blah, blah just dropped. Like, it's a meme, right? And so I posted it and said, honey, wake up, a new Porter sibling Dreyer Drive episode just dropped. And like 10 seconds later, Justin, my husband, texted me and said, the only time you've used the word honey to describe something is when you're talking about chicken. And I was like, I am your wife. Like, he was put out. He's like, you've never called me honey. The only time you use the word honey is when you're ordering chicken at a Chinese restaurant. And I was like, okay. Did you listen to the podcast? He was like, no.
And he's like, and I would like you to immediately go back to calling me what you've called me for these last 19 years. Loaf.
Stop.
He's done it. He's done it, folks. He's done it.
I've never used a pet name. Like, it's just not, my husband's name is Justin. My husband, Justin. I have a husband. His name is Justin. That's one thing I know for sure. But I've never used, like, I've never called him, we're not like a babe or a honey. And our parents, I think, don't really use them either, except that dad calls mom Bon. Her name's Bonnie, and he'll call her Bon. And mom calls him Rick. And that's it.
Can I tell you? When Noah was like 2, she would do this thing where she would call for dad. So she'd be like, for me, she'd be like, daddy or mommy, or for our mom, she would be Gigi, like when she wanted attention. With dad, I kid you not, she'd be like, Rick, Ricky, Ricky, Rick, Rick, Ricky, Rick. That's how she would call for dad. I'm like, oh my gosh.
So sweet.
Well,
okay.
There you go. That was another episode of the Dreyer Drive Podcast. We've said it before. I will say it again. Give us a rating, preferably 5 stars. Subscribe to this. Tell your friends and your family and other Exeter High School graduates. This is where you'll find us.
There's tens of us.
There are tens of us.
I honestly can't wait to hear back from people who graduated from Exeter, because
I love that you assume. I love that you assume that they're listening.
We're out there. They are listening. That is our core audience, is Exeter High School graduates between...
And dropouts. We're A. And dropouts.
You know, it's fine. Whatever. Chase your bliss. But I do think that's our core audience, and I'm really hoping that we grab onto them. Hold on for dear life, because that's our core audience.
I cannot wait for this to be in the marketing, like the university marketing course where they're doing case studies of like, they're like, and look over here. Look at this wonderful example of how to grow an audience organically. And now on this other side, we have exactly what you never want to do. There was a podcast launched in 2024. You've never heard of it. It was called the Dreyer Drive Podcast by these 2 siblings who insisted on specific, not only time period, but geo-specific content that limited them maximum to a total addressable market of 60,000 people, less the ones that didn't graduate from Exeter. Their total addressable market ended up being 73 people.
And you know what? We're happy to have you.
We're happy to have the 6 of you that found
every
us.
single one. Every single one of you.
Let's bring the other 67 into the fold. All right. Well, that was fun. Just you and I reminiscing on the good old days. We can't wait to see you all at the sports bar. Mac and cheese sandwich in hand. Stay crispy. It just flowed. It just flowed.
The Falcon's Nest. No, it's the Falcon's Nest. I screwed it up. Say it again.
No, that is going down. That you did not know.